And welcome to the New Mexico Department of Justice. I am pleased to be joined today by Representative Linda Serrato of Santa Fe to announce an important new proposal that I hope will be the subject of significant conversation and debate in the upcoming legislative session. A little more than 48 hours ago, as many of you are aware, this office and the Special Agents of the Internet Crimes Against Children Division took an individual into custody and charged that individual with possessing multiple images of child pornography. And what made this case unique is the fact that this is the first instance, as far as we are aware, of someone who actually used artificial intelligence to generate images of sexual exploitation by using publicly available images of children and then modifying those images in a way which is truly horrific and will create lasting harm. But in a broader sense, I think it is a significant turning point and should hopefully serve as a wake-up call for all of us. For policymakers, for community leaders, for parents and educators, about the way in which artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming a part of everyday life. It is being, as we know, utilized by businesses. It's being utilized by everyday citizens. We utilize it to a limited extent in this building. But like all technology, it is something that can be misused and abused. And one of the most damaging aspects of artificial intelligence today is the ease with which people can create malicious deepfake content, audio images or audio files, videos, and images that purport to show some conduct, some speech, something that is then produced and disseminated on social media platforms and can cause profound economic harm, shame, disruption, an invasion of privacy, reputational harm in the community. And for most people, this is still theoretical, but what I am concerned about is the ease with which this technology is being used and adapted and utilized first by predators, but increasingly by other individuals who are motivated by different interests. They will use this to harm other individuals and to take advantage of people. And so because of that rising threat to members of our community and to our society, I think it's important for New Mexico to take a leading role in trying to develop a framework that sets clear guidelines and boundaries for the ethical development of this technology and the ethical use of this technology, and to create a framework that is fundamentally grounded in accountability. I think we all have a basic sense of what it means to be accountable for our actions and accountable for our choices. One of the difficult things, because of this technology, is the way in which it allows anonymous people to create real harm to others. And so because of that, we are proud to announce our proposal, which will be the first AI Accountability Act in the state of New Mexico. And it provides certain core elements that we think are essential to protecting our people. First, it creates clear technical standards for AI developers, for large social media platforms, and for device manufacturers to ensure that they actually include latent digital markers in the content that is produced and in the content that is published, so that anyone who is potentially harmed by that content can work and with those providers to understand where the content was generated, who disseminated it, and from that information, we will be able to determine who is ultimately responsible for the reputational harm that comes from the publication and production of that materials. There are two specific features on the civil enforcement side that I think are absolutely necessary for the full enforcement of this act and its provisions. The first is to give this office authority to investigate any allegations that operators in the tech space, those are the large social media applications and artificial intelligence applications, to ensure that they do in fact comply with the technical requirements of making their products available in the state. That will be my responsibility and this office's responsibility, and we will be available to consumers who, upon learning that they have been the victim of this type of event, if they reach out to someone in the technology space and we learn that those companies have failed to include these technical requirements, we will be empowered to pursue civil remedies. At the same time, this creates a private right of action for individuals who may have been harmed by the unlawful production and dissemination of those materials, and will include the recovery of the greater of actual damages or $1,000 per view or per event that content is interacted with. That's a steep and heavy price to pay, but I think it is in line with the type of harm and a necessary deterrent for making sure that this activity is not in any way allowed, or that there is some signal sent by the justice system or by our legal system that this is conduct that will be tolerated. And last, we have also included a criminal component in this proposed legislation, which would add an additional 1 year of a potential penalty whenever generative AI is used in furtherance of an underlying felony crime. So for example, the case that we just filed, we could enhance the penalty for that crime because of the use of generative AI. We think this is appropriate given the speed and scale and potential harm of sharing information and images related to victims who have no connection to this activity. We also, however, are concerned about limiting criminal liability just to the exploitation context. We know that generative AI will be used to commit fraud, to commit theft, to commit extortion, will be a part of aggravated stalking. There are a whole range of felony crimes that are already on the books under our criminal code. We don't need to transform all of those. I know that's a very difficult thing to do in the legislature, and so our approach would enhance the sentence for committing those felonies if generative AI is used in connection with that felony. And if there's a question about whether or not this is something that the criminal justice system is unaccustomed to, I can assure you it isn't. That's exactly how we handle firearm enhancements, for example, in this state. Anytime you use a firearm in the commission of or in furtherance of an underlying felony crime, you can enhance the penalty. So we are treating this technology and its misuse in much the same way that we treat generative AI and firearms. So it would be the same type of framework that we use to address it. At root and at its core, what we are trying to do is to create a standard legal framework that will allow for the responsible use of this technology, because I think the representative and I have an understanding and appreciation that there are profound benefits that can be had from artificial intelligence, including generative artificial intelligence. But it is the malicious misuse and the criminal misuse of that technology that New Mexico cannot stand by and watch. I think we both are concerned about recent developments at the national level, both at the White House and in Congress, among people who are doing everything they can to remove the obstacles in the AI race that is currently underway in some of America's biggest tech companies, and in the AI race that is underway between the United States and China and global competitors. But what I will say is that I think most Americans, Democrats, Republicans, independents, doesn't matter where you are, where you live, I think there is an understandable anxiety about giving that much unchecked power to big tech companies to police itself. As many of you are aware, this office has litigation that we are preparing to go to trial in the early part of February against one of the largest social media platforms on the planet. And that is a direct result of what a hands-off approach to regulating technology will lead to. It can lead to abuse. It can lead to corporate behavior and business practices that place profit and engagement over privacy and over the safety interests and concerns of everyday citizens. That's a mistake that we can ill afford to make again in this country, and one that Representative Serrato and I are committed to learning from. And so with that, I want to invite Representative Serrato to give her comments and feedback on the proposed legislation, and we'll open it up for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to take a second to thank the Attorney General for inviting me today. As I think a lot of you know, wading into criminal work isn't exactly what I do every day. I got involved in the AI side of this because I ran an AI summit recently. And even before then, I had folks coming to me and talking to me about all these issues that are popping up. And it was really interesting. We had 140 folks at that AI summit last month. It had folks from business, advocacy, legislators, community members, students, all talking about what AI was. And there was not one hallelujah moment where we all said, hey, this is how AI is supposed to be. But it was very clear that in order to get an AI ecosystem that we want to see in our state, we have to crack down on the bad actors who are misusing this and harming individuals. And at this point, I see that there are two major pieces of this, and it's the data protection aspect of it, which we've seen the federal government abuse multiple times, and it's also the AI use. Because it is everywhere. It's in every crevice of our modern day. I'm going to get into my car and I will use AI at some point. I will talk on the phone and my minutes will be translated in some way. It is in every sector. And so many New Mexicans' data and so many New Mexicans are utilizing AI, or their data is being put through AI that they don't even realize it. And so our job as leaders in this state is to make sure that they have a sense of comfort and protection, because that is our New Mexico values. I have talked to other states, and too few of them come from it too few folks come from it from a point of protection first oftentimes, because we all want to see our states thrive. We want to be the leaders in different things. But this is an opportunity for New Mexico to show how we can create an ecosystem where AI works for us, that it's not about just making it better for businesses or for those who are profiting off of it. We have seen the federal government fail to protect New Mexicans again and again and again. And this is a vicious failure of their ability to protect Americans. They have made it so difficult for us to ensure that we are protecting populations. And this isn't a partisan issue. I have talked to Republicans and Democrats and independents and folks that don't even want to engage in politics. And it's very clear that we all believe that we have a fundamental right to our data because it is a modern day use of our personal information that they didn't have in the 1700s, as all of us know. It is important that states like ours, like the states that the AG has worked with and learned from, that we step in to make sure that we are promoting responsible AI. Transparency and responsibility that is core to what that is. And if you fail to do that, there are real penalties that take place. I appreciate what we've been able to develop is clear on who is involved, because you have developers, you have processors, and these are all definitions that don't necessarily exist in other realms. But to be very clear about who is responsible is a big aspect to me of what we can do. And so we've seen this develop. But I want to be clear, as I mentioned, I'm on the Commerce Committee, I'm on the Land Grant Committee. I come from it from a very different perspective. I want to see us build an AI ecosystem where land grant heirs are able to utilize the technology to govern the land of their ancestors in ways that their ancestors couldn't even imagine. I want to see AI protecting Ruidoso and places where wildfires have gotten out of control so that they can predict it and protect their property and their land, where our kids are developing biotech companies that haven't been thought of already. This is what AI should be used for. And the first step is rooting out bad actors, and the first step is holding people accountable. So I do want to say thank you to the AG for this, and I believe that by empowering our protector-in-chief to take that bold stand, New Mexico will be a leader that we need to take a stand on this. Thank you.
So with that, I'll open it up for any questions you may have.
Has this bill been pre-filed? Is it available to us?
No, so it's still in the process, and it should be up by the first day of session, by gavel down.
I've got a microphone, guys. I'll start with you.
Could we get a copy of material?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we can provide the draft that was submitted to LCS, the council service, as folks who may not be aware with of the process, we submit in coordination with representative and prepared a full text overlay of what the bill would be, but it's up to the drafters to actually fit that into their format. We talked to the drafter earlier today, and we're in the queue, but we're happy to give the underlying draft to you so you'll have a deeper understanding of what the bill looks like.
Please announce your name and your outlet when I hand you the mic.
Yeah, hi, Morgan Stevens, KOB4. So have you received the nod from the governor that this will be included in the legislative agenda?
Yeah, we have had a lot of conversations already with the governor's team, and I'm very optimistic. I don't want to predict, let's knock on wood situation, but I'm optimistic this is something that will be included.
Addison Fulton with the Daily Lobo. The Trump administration recently issued an executive order attempting to federalize and unify the nation's AI policies and remove what he referred to as burdensome restrictions on tech companies. Do you foresee that executive order causing issues for passing and enforcing this legislation, and how do you hope to deal with those obstacles should they come up?
So I have an understanding that the executive order that you referenced directs the Department of Justice to initiate potential litigation against any states that attempt to regulate artificial intelligence. What is interesting about that debate is the fact that there are a number of red states, very conservative states, that are pushing back against the administration because they recognize that this is not a form of technology that can be, frankly, left up to to tech companies and the leaders of those companies to police themselves. I certainly would hope that the substance of what we are trying to achieve and accomplish would be reviewed by the Trump administration before they undertake any action. But I can tell you that we stand prepared to withstand any legal challenge that's brought. I can tell you from a legal standpoint that the states are empowered under our Constitution to protect their citizens. And the federal government can only preempt state action with a bill that's passed by Congress and that is comprehensively seeking to exclude states from taking that action. No president of any party, by virtue of an executive order, can keep any state, this state or a deep red conservative state, from doing what they think is necessary under their inherent police powers to protect their citizens. And I think, to the representative's earlier point, there are very few things anymore where you can get a substantial number of Americans on both sides of the aisle to come together and agree. You know what one of those things is? The threat of artificial intelligence and the speed of this technology. Most Americans, including a lot of people who voted for the president, are profoundly uncomfortable with a hands-off approach with this. And I think that will help us not only pass the legislation, but will inform any litigation that we are forced to undertake in its defense.
Danielle Prokop with Source New Mexico. Can you speak to the private right of action? Last year, when bringing a data privacy bill, it didn't have a private right of action, and there was a competing bill. What changed to bring it in this legislation this year?
So that was a separate bill that the representative and I worked on, and our office worked on, and I know that that's going to be another proposal that's going to be probably hotly debated in the upcoming legislative session. I think for this issue, the impact of malicious deepfakes is so profound and so self-evident that it calls out in, I think, unique ways for a solution that empowers everyday people to have an opportunity to obtain legal counsel and hold tech companies accountable, but more importantly, the people who produce this content in the first place. And it is so widespread that without a private right of action, I think it would be very difficult to create the kind of incentive structure that you would need. And I think it was slightly different in the privacy context because at that level, there were opportunities for this office to be the enforcement power because we were able to work on wholesale brokering of data under certain contracts. So you could go and engage in a legal enforcement action that would shut down an entire company. But in this situation, we could have tech companies in full compliance, and we hope that they are in full compliance by embedding the latent digital markers that would enable accountability. But then we have private individuals who are still harmed by its production and dissemination. And under our current law, this office isn't allowed to represent private individuals. And so we felt it was necessary to make it clear that they could have not only their common law causes of action, but a clear statutory penalty of $1,000 per impression, which is a substantial, I mean, if you think about it, that is a substantial penalty for a malicious deepfake that racks up 1 million likes or 1 million clicks or is reshared that many times. But I think that is setting a penalty that is appropriate to deter the kind of behavior and given the nature of the harm that we're seeing. Yeah.
I really appreciate that question. So I think there's two aspects to that, and I'll start with the latter. So one is best practices and what we've seen. And across the nation when it comes to data protection, there is no state that has a wholesale private right of action. In fact, the ones that do, California in particular, I believe that's the only one when it comes to data protection, there is a specific to when there are breaches on your financial information that gets abused, and then, you know, your credit card's out there and it's being abused in a million ways. Then you can use a private right of action for that. That just passed, and I believe it's only been in effect for a year or so at this point. And so that's still a relatively new concept in this space. We have heard a lot from individual businesses, both within New Mexico, smaller ones and larger ones, that it would be very difficult for them to manage that. So that's one aspect of it. And then I pair it with the other aspect that the AG was talking about. When you're talking about data protection infringements, and what that bill was protecting was these larger breaches or these larger violations of data. So in that bill that we presented last year and that I'm bringing back this year, and look, you know, it is negative 5 days until session, and we continue to work with our partners and everybody in that building. Collaboration is key in the legislature. But from my perspective, and especially at this point, we have points in the bill that will ensure that you are that you have a right to correct. That I can go into any website and say, I'm not a 40-something-year-old Latina woman. I am a man who's 70 years old, and I have a right to change whatever data I want. I can opt out still on those pieces. And that ability to correct, as I've heard, it's when we began and continuing onward, is actually even more powerful, because then it holds them accountable to correct. And then if should they fail, then it's a much larger lawsuit that's carried out from an office like this.
Wanted to clarify the 1,000 per view. Is that against the publisher? Like, let's say X.com, would that be against them? Would that be against the person who, say, posted it to X, or would that be the person who originally created it? All three? I just want to make sure I'm understanding that.
Sure. So the enforcement powers that have been granted under the bill to this agency would allow this agency to pursue $15,000 per day, every day that a tech company is out of compliance. The $1,000 per view is for the producer of that material, but also another person or individual who knowingly or recklessly disseminates a malicious deepfake. And so there is potential for expanded liability for anyone who is responsible for producing that or knowingly disseminating that in violation of somebody's privacy interests.
We've got time for one more, Morgan.
Yeah, so other lawmakers in Santa Fe, Christine Chandler, she's introduced a bill recently on deepfakes. Just curious, are you guys working in tandem? Is this separate? Just to clarify those two pieces of legislation.
Sure, and I would invite the representative to speak on this also, but we spoke with Representative Chandler earlier this week. We talked to her briefly about our proposal. At this point, we don't see any conflict in the proposals, and so and we wanted to make that clear. I understand that she has a separate bill that targets algorithmic discrimination. This doesn't touch on that. It's mostly or exclusively about malicious deepfakes and generative AI. The one I think there's a place where there may be a slight misalignment in that we are focused on the use of generative AI in furtherance of a felony, and so we would be able to enhance that felony. As I understand it, the criminal penalty proposed under her deepfake criminal statute is related to the revenge porn statute, which currently sets a misdemeanor penalty. And so we're not able to enhance misdemeanors in that way. And so to the extent I would offer a suggestion for members of the body to consider is whether or not it makes sense to elevate the penalty for revenge porn from a misdemeanor to a felony, in which case that would put both of these bills in alignment, and then we could enhance that underlying penalty by a year by the use of generative AI. But at this point, there is no direct conflict as far as we can see. One of the primary differences, however, is that this bill has clear standards for tech companies themselves, right? One of my concerns with just changing or including deepfakes in a misdemeanor criminal penalty is that if you don't require tech companies to embed digital signatures, you're not going to be able to follow the breadcrumbs back through the platform to the application and then ultimately figure out who's responsible. In other words, we're going to have a hard time enforcing that from a criminal standpoint. You're going to limit your ability to actually enforce it, and I don't want to create an expectation where there is a crime that exists on the books, but our investigators and frontline special agents are just at a loss of trying to prove it. This latest arrest that we made is an example of what we can do through existing tools, search warrants, statements, and the like. But by requiring tech companies to embed that digital signature, it makes it a lot easier to work backwards and find out where it came from, how it was produced, and where it was disseminated. And so my hope is that both of these bills, or all of these sort of collectively, form the basis for a real deliberate discussion and debate about where to set penalties, how to provide prosecutors and investigators with the tools that they need, whether or not you should have a private right of action or shift all enforcement into this agency. I'm not going to prejudge any of that, and that is the hard work that I know the representative is going to do, but the Representative Chandler, Chairwoman Chandler, is well aware of what we are trying to accomplish, and my hope is that by getting everybody in a room, we can start to align some of these bills, but the most important thing is that we do something. I mean, the most important thing is that we don't have another session pass us by without recognizing that this is something that has to be acted on.
Yeah, there are a few legislators that are looking at bills, and we all talk. I mean, 70 people isn't as big as you think it is. And so part of that, though, is this process. To the AG's point, we don't have anything. There's no protection for any New Mexicans right now when it comes to a lot of the enhancements by AI, but also the data protection aspect. For those reasons, we need to take serious action. Every single bill that gets introduced about about AI should be heard in committee, and it should be considered by our colleagues. And I believe we can come to a good solution and collaboration. We've seen that happen a lot of times. And so, there's been bills that have already dropped. There are more that are coming. You know, everybody's in the queue at somewhere. Last session, we had an AI bill, a data privacy bill. There was another data privacy bill. There was, Chandler had a different AI bill. There was 2 other memorials on AI, and then I believe 1 on education. 7 bills on it last year alone. So I anticipate, and by 4 or 5, at least 10 members, So I imagine we're going to continue to work together. But, I was at a breakfast last week in Santa Fe with my colleague Tara Lujan, and she came up and said, I really want to chat with you about these bills, right? Because I have one that I want to talk to you about. I've heard from senators as well. So I anticipate we'll continue to see those partnerships, blossom as we go.
All right, thank you again. We really appreciate your time and attention. This is a critical issue for our community, for our kids, for our businesses. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out and follow up. Thank you.